Hello, I'm Daniel, and today I'm excited to bring you the first episode in our new series, Music, Movies, Gaming, and You. Why music, movies, and gaming, specifically, you ask? Well, personally, I enjoy a lot of all three. I love listening to music, I love watching movies, and I love playing and making video games. Here's the thing, I can find plenty of channels out there covering music exclusively. I can find plenty of channels out there covering movies exclusively, and there's a few channels that deal with gaming audio hardware as well, though not as many. But nobody is covering all three. And so I've taken it upon myself to wear this heavy burden. So it's my goal here to help you make informed decisions, regardless of if you just like music, if you just like movies, if you just like games, if you like a combination of any of these, I'm here to help. And that brings us to what we're looking at today, the Audio Pro A26. You can see sitting behind me here. So Audio Pro is a Swedish manufacturer, and I've been waiting a little while to cover these in detail. In fact, I've already done an unboxing video for these speakers, which you can actually find in the description below. Personally, I think they're a pretty snazzy looking set of speakers, especially at their price point, and they never really seem to cease getting people's attention when they walk into the store. Setting the speakers up is an absolute breeze. It's as simple as plugging the master speaker into a power outlet and then feeding the supplied speaker cable to the slave. You're done. Easy peasy. Now, if you want a little bit more control, you also have the option of using the Audio Pro app, and it will allow you to do things like change the settings based on where the speakers are sitting in the room, and you can choose if the master speaker is going to be sitting on the left or the right, which is a handy feature. Now, along with letting you set the speakers up to suit your personal tastes, the Audio Pro app will also allow you to connect Spotify Connect. Something to be aware of is if you're like me and you have two networks running in your home, I have a standard 2.4G and a 5G, mainly stick to the 5G for music streaming because my 2.4 is congested to all hell with all these devices I have. These speakers will only work with that 2.4 gig network. So obviously not a deal breaker or a big issue for most people, but if you're someone like me that uses your 5G specifically for music, that is something to be aware of. Something else to be aware of is one of the coolest features on these little speakers, and that is a little LED on the master speaker, and that will tell you exactly what audio source is feeding into it at any one time. So if you need to know what's feeding into it or what someone else is feeding into these speakers at a quick glance, it's as simple as looking at the front. For example, the Toslink is red, Wi-Fi is white, auxiliary is green, etc. Super straightforward. The build itself is incredibly sturdy, but they aren't heavy or weighty at all, which is really nice. If you want something that's going to sit on your desk easily without putting any extra pressure on it, you know, they're the perfect weight for that. Now, personally, I'm a big remote man, and I love the remote for this unit. It doesn't have a mute button, which is kind of lame, but everything else about it is just, it screams quality. It's aluminium, it's weighty, it's heavy, the buttons feel nice to press. We have far more expensive units than these speakers here, and the remotes don't feel anywhere near as premium as what this does. So that's a really nice thing if you're someone who's into remote controls like I am. In terms of actual specs, the speakers pack two 75-watt Class D amplifiers. They're both found in the master speaker, obviously powering the slave, and those amplifiers are driving an 11.5 centimeter woofer and a 2.5 centimeter textile dome tweeter. Physical inputs wise, you get access to HDMI ARC, an optical port, and an auxiliary port. And as mentioned before, you also get access to Spotify Connect through Wi-Fi, and there is, of course, Bluetooth. So given the vast array of options on these speakers, you can probably understand why I picked these ones specifically to be the first product that we've reviewed for this particular series. But it's time to talk about what really matters, and that's the audio experience. So let's get into music. So this is where things start getting a little interesting and a little bit complicated. I tried three specific ways of experiencing music through these speakers, and they all gave me different results. And that was interesting and it was exciting. First up, I tried Spotify Connect. For a majority of the music I listened to, I was pretty impressed by the quality of the sound coming out of these guys, given the small size of their drivers. There was a little bit of a brightness to the sound, which really sat well with genres like pop, electronica, and a little bit of hip hop. And the quality of the imaging, keeping in mind I was near field listening, was actually really good. The track Good News by Mac Miller in particular really stood out to me with some really clear separation. Once I tried some heavier rock tracks, things started to get a little bit muddy. Tracks like Sing Along by Sturgill Simpson or Loyalty from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard's most recent live album, the separation kind of disappeared a little bit, and I was very curious about what was going on here with that. Could it be a limitation of the speaker, I thought? Turns out the answer is no. And that leads me to using these speakers with a turntable, and I specifically chose the Pro-Ject T1 because its price point matches beautifully with these particular units. And I gotta say, I was genuinely surprised at how great these two units sounded matched together. You could almost say that they were made for each other, in my opinion. I tried a mix of newer prints from Death Grips and Boards of Canada, as well as some vintage records I have for Devo and Kid Dynamite, and everything sounded rich and textured. And hearing the quality of the audio coming from the T1 through these speakers had me wondering, what would those two tracks that struggle through Spotify Connect sound like running through the auxiliary port? So I decided to switch to a little preamp I have, this being specifically the Pro-Ject Headbox S2, and to feed that through the auxiliary port. And I immediately noticed that there was a little bit more bottom end coming through, and that brightness that was there earlier was kind of pulled back a little bit. More importantly though, was that the imaging that was lacking in those two tracks specifically was back again. And this is what makes these speakers interesting. It's the fact that they're designed to work as a soundbar alternative as well. And any good soundbar comes with a subwoofer. And I think the DAC in these speakers is tuned with that in mind. So given the musical performance of these speakers, I was very curious to hear how they would perform with television and movies. Almost all of the lifestyle images that Audio Pro has released of these speakers has them paired up with a TV, so they obviously have a great deal of confidence in these speakers as a replacement for soundbars. And so to test this out, I wanted to do it a couple of different ways, and the first way I did it is the way most people would use these at home, I imagine, which is just running through HDMI ARC from your TV and streaming Netflix. My main concern with using stereo speakers instead of a soundbar is always going to be that lack of a center channel where the voice sits. And so that's what I wanted to focus on first and foremost. And in that regard, these speakers did admirably. I watched several episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well as a few other shows, comedies, because there's always that focus on the center channel in that sort of programming. And at no point was there any issues with the clarity of those vocals. What about a more thorough test? Well, I tried John Wick 3, which has a much more noisy soundscape. And once again, action scenes or dialogue focused scenes, I had no troubles understanding what was said at any point. Everything came through crystal clear. Now for the second set of tests, I wanted to focus on the audio quality itself. And to do that, I decided to try some Blu-rays through my Xbox One S. I was using the optical in, and I had my Xbox audio output set to uncompressed stereo. That meant the down mixing was all handled by the Xbox itself, and I could focus purely on the quality of the sound. Like so many other people, my first port of call when I'm testing speakers from movies is Mad Max Fury Road. I like it because it tests a unit's bottom end. Tom Hardy's voiceover in this case sounded deep and gravelly, which is good, that's what you want. The sound of the V8 Interceptor's engine roaring though, well, yeah, it sounded appropriately gravelly, but it didn't have that bottom end, which, given the size of the speakers, isn't a surprise. Next up, I tried the Avengers Endgame, and I did that to test its imaging. The end sequence of that film is incredibly chaotic, and it was great to hear that these speakers managed to keep pace with everything that was going on. There was clear separation between the characters, between the action, and following the action as the camera was moving around. At no point did I feel like I was getting lost in a noisy mix. Lastly, I checked out Shin Godzilla, which might sound like an odd choice. I chose it because it has a very minimalist soundscape, and the audio choices made are weird, but in a really deliberate sort of way. There's one sequence in particular where Godzilla's using his laser breath, and it is an incredibly sharp sound, and I was very curious to hear how the brighter DAC of these units would handle that. And they handled it brilliantly. It was absolutely ear-piercing, which sounds like a negative, but it's exactly how it's supposed to sound. So big thumbs up there. All in all, I was quite impressed with what these speakers could do in the context of film and television. And I'm coming away with very little in terms of complaints. In my opinion, these speakers sound just as good, if not a little better, than most other soundbars in their price range. That said, if you're into action movies in particular, I do recommend getting a subwoofer to go with them, but that's to be expected given the speaker's small size. And if you were to get a soundbar, you'd probably end up having to get a subwoofer anyway. Lastly, I tried these for gaming. How do the A26 hold up as gaming speakers? Well, for consistency's sake, I tried these games two ways. I tried running them through my Xbox One S, once again, uncompressed stereo through optical, and I played through each of these tests a second time using the auxiliary port through my own external DAC. Now, of important note is I was using these at a computer desk with a monitor for near field listening. That's how I personally play games. So please take that into account with what I'm about to say. And what I want to say is playing games with these was a relatively shocking experience. The first game I tried was Battlefield 1. I'm a big fan of its tutorial level, and I think it's a great way of checking not just spatial range of speakers, but also the dynamics. And the detail coming through the A26 for this particular level was genuinely exceptional. I had absolutely no issues working out purely through audio where gunfire was coming from. The spatial separation and the soundstage was great. Was it perfect? No. Battlefield 1 has a very, very dynamic range, and I definitely noticed the lack of bottom end in this particular title more than anything else I tested. That said, playing the exact same level through the auxiliary port with that additional bottom end brought back in by bypassing the DAC, the audio was far more balanced, and once again that soundstage and that detail was still there. The next title I tested was Doom Eternal. And this game's interesting because it doesn't have a huge emphasis on low end, at least outside of the soundtrack. And once again, it was the soundstage and imaging that stood out to me, the detail that was there that surprised me. Unlike Battlefield 1, Doom Eternal, your situational awareness is heightened in a different way because you have enemies actually actively running around you in an arena-style environment instead of a linear one. The speakers excelled still. I could hear what enemies were off-screen. I knew where to go. It was a very surreal experience, not because I haven't experienced this before, but because I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. Lastly, I tried Skyrim Special Edition, and I know what you're saying, this game's old, why would you try it? And the truth is, I still think its environmental audio design is absolutely stellar and has stood the test of time in a way that nothing else about it has. Skyrim allowed me to try multiple environments with multiple different weather conditions. I tried it out in the windy plains, I was up in the mountains in the rain, and always the environmental sound had a sense of presence to it. Even subtle things like the directionality of the crickets in the grass was all there in a way that I wasn't expecting, despite having heard the two previous games. The thing that surprised me most was what I call the waterfall test, where I stood my character next to a waterfall and just rotated the camera in 360 degrees around them. And I was really happy to find just how smooth that audio transition was making its way around. Despite only being stereo speakers, I did feel like it was wrapping around me, which was really impressive. Now, again, if you want that little extra bottom end while you're playing games, I would recommend using the auxiliary port and an external DAC. But unlike movies, at least for near field listening, like I said, you can get away without using a subwoofer for gaming, I think. And really that begs the question, who do I personally, from my experience with these, think these speakers are for? Who would I recommend them to? First of all, thanks to the speaker's inbuilt amplifiers, anyone who is getting into vinyl records now. As I said earlier, I matched the Pro-Ject T1 with it, and I imagine the Essential 3 would be much the same. These sort of units sound fantastic paired up with these speakers. So if you're looking for an all-in-one solution to get into records without having to buy a separate amplifier, separate speakers, these are for you. This is your gateway to vinyl records. If you're someone who's in the market for a soundbar but also want to be able to enjoy music, then I can also recommend these speakers to you. I think they're perfect for that scenario. Like I said, I think they sound as good, if not better, than any soundbars I've heard within their price range. And in terms of music, compared to how it would sound on a soundbar of the same price point, there's absolutely no competition. These win hands down. So these will give you a degree of flexibility that soundbar will not. And again, I recommend if you're into action movies, get that subwoofer to go with it. Personally, I recommend the Audio Pro C sub. The units are engineered with each other in mind, but of course, depending on your needs, you might want something else. Lastly, desktop gaming. These are great. The imaging, the soundstage, the sensor directionality. These speakers are fantastic for gaming, and I haven't heard desktop speakers at this price that sounded this clear and detailed. For example, if you've been using Logitech speakers for your gaming at home or game development or even video editing, these are a fantastic option for an upgrade. I also think if you were to pair these with an external DAC, like say the DragonFly Black or DragonFly Red for gaming at a PC, these would also be exceptional. And that's it really. I had a great time testing these speakers for review, a genuinely fun time. The A26 might be a small unit, but it punches well above its weight. Now, if you'd like more information on this unit, you can find a link in the description below, as well as a link to the playlist of the tracks that I tested for this particular review, as well as a list of the games, movies, and vinyl records I tested. As always, thank you for watching. If you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Or if you're in Australia, you can always give us a call. Thanks again for watching. Until next time. If you enjoyed this video, you can support us by giving us a like and subscribe, along with hitting the notification bell. You can also follow us on our Facebook and Instagram. Until next time.